All right, so let's dig a little deeper into this. Joining me now is Curtis Hunter. Hunter is a member of the Corporate and Securities Practice Group at Becker, where his practice includes complex corporate tax matters. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
And you're a Republican?
I am.
You're a Trump supporter?
I am.
So let's talk about Marco Rubio's comments. What was your impression? You had read, because I know you and I had talked, you had read the initial comments in The Economist.
I did.
Then he's trying to clean it up a little bit there, but he still seems to be suggesting that the money isn't really flowing to the workers as much as it could.
He's suggesting a lot of things, but when I first read the article in The Economist, I was hoping it was a misinterpretation of his words. And the day after that, or 2 days after that, I think he kind of didn't really back off of it, but he kind of smoothed it out and said, well, yes, the tax cuts do have benefits to the American worker, but it's not doing as much as it could do. So I was, again, one thing that surprises me is we're in a midterm election year, and for a Republican to not be singing the praises of all the benefits of the tax cut, instead looking at, or trying to look at, or consider what it's not doing, was somewhat surprising from Senator Rubio.
Well, let's go to the basic point. The argument that says that, and Senator Rubio did say that he thinks the tax cuts overall were good, and he was supportive of them. But do you believe that the tax cuts have benefited the workers in the companies as much as it has benefited the companies themselves and the shareholders?
I do. A couple days, I think it may have been the day that the Senate voted on the tax bill. Senator Rubio made a quote that the taxpayer, the American worker, what they're going on is what they're hearing and reading in the public or in the media. Mm-hmm. And he said, come February or March, when these taxpayers or workers start getting $200-300 extra in their paycheck, that's what they're going to focus on. And he had also mentioned that further down this year, in November, the American worker is going to look at all the money they've made through the year instead of listening to the fact that the tax cuts aren't going to benefit them. So I think it was premature for him to judge whether or not it's benefiting the American worker. I think it is drastically benefiting the American worker. Most, if not all, workers received some bump in their pay in February or March, which will continue.
That's because of the personal tax rate being lower, not because of the corporate tax rate.
Well, I mean, to me, I look at, being a tax attorney, I look at both from a corporate tax standpoint and from an income tax standpoint. The income tax standpoint, they're looking at the benefit of the increase in pay now, and then when they pay the taxes.
Let's stay on the corporate tax side.
Corporate tax side.
Do you see that the corporate tax rate, the lowering it from, what was it, 35%
to 21.
down to 21? We all know the effective tax rate was lower anyway. It wasn't really that big a drop.
Right.
But do you think that benefited workers and employees?
It did. We saw the enthusiasm before the tax bill ever was even signed and taken into account. Companies, Boeing, AT&T, they started giving bonuses to their employees. Wages started to increase. So we saw, even before the bill was passed, we saw the benefits already coming. And I think that's continued ongoing. The thing that really surprises me about a Republican senator is, at 35%, we were at a very disadvantageous position when looking at the industrialized world. We had one of the highest corporate tax rates in the world.
But again, the effectiveness, no corporations were paying 35%.
Well, I mean, that's because they were moving everything overseas. So the incentive of lowering the tax rate from 35 to 21%, bring those funds back, bring those jobs back that went overseas, so these larger corporations wouldn't have to pay the taxes, bring those back here, and on top of that, you've got the incentive of companies. You don't really look at what companies are doing with the cash now from the benefit. It takes time. It takes time.
I just want Americans for Tax Fairness, and there are different groups, and people may argue with this, but the Americans for Tax Fairness said in their analysis only 4.2% of workers were getting bonuses or wage hikes because of the corporate tax cut. That's roughly 6.5 million workers out of the 155 million workforce in the country. Right. It's a small percentage of people who've seen from the corporate tax rate being lowered any real benefit according to their analysis.
Again, my point is it's too early. It's way too premature to be judging the net effect of the corporate tax rate being reduced to 21% at this point. What corporations do from an economy standpoint, what corporations do with the cash, the extra cash that they have now from the reduced rate, is not what you look at. You look at the behavioral changes in these companies, what they do with the funds over a long period of time. Do they invest it back in the company?
Well, if they buy back shares, it doesn't really benefit the workers, right?
Well,
a lot of them are buying back just shares of their own company.
Sure, but they can do both. They can multitask. They can pay benefits or dividends to shareholders, which, by the way, a lot of these employees in these companies, the American worker, as Senator Rubio referred refers to them, they're also receiving dividends from those shares that they own in the companies. So you've got that going. You've got the incentivize of the corporation to invest research and development, expanding factories. That's the clear benefit of the reduction in the corporate tax rate, which will take time to see.
So I guess that's the sort of the bottom line is it may be premature to be able to evaluate one way or the other whether or not the corporate tax cuts are having a real benefit for the workers in them. You believe they will. Senator Rubio is a little bit more skeptical, and Democrats are even more skeptical than that.
I think Senator Rubio, his kind of catching point on all this is the child tax credit. He wanted the child tax credit doubled from $1,000 per child to $2,000, which this new tax cut does. It also, the refundable part, I think, is where he has the biggest issue, which is the refundable part is the amount of the credit that's over the tax liability. So the tax cut bill increases that from $1,100 per child to $1,400 per child.
Yes,
I think he wanted it to be the full $2,000.
And part of that is, again, if you give money directly into working families, inject it directly into them, it probably has better impact on the economy.
Correct.
Well, that's the time we got now. Okay. I know we probably lost people because we're talking tax policy, but it's important because it really does have an impact.
Right.
I want to thank you very much for coming in. We'll have you back. We'll talk more about these things.
My pleasure, Jim.
All right. We'll be right back after the